Hi everyone, this is lesson 10. This lesson gets into comparing unit fractions. So one section of a whole thing and looking at how they compare to each other. Okay, so if we look at number 1, it says each fraction strip is a whole. So each one of these is a whole, and you'll notice they're the same size. They start and end at the same place, so they're all wholes. They are all equal in length. They're telling you that right here. Color one fractional unit in each strip, then answer the questions below. Alright, so I'm just going to get my color out here and I'm going to color one. And I would recommend coloring just the very first one of each one. Don't get all crafty and color in random ones because they won't be as easy to compare if you do that. Okay? Alright, so if you need to pause it to finish coloring, go ahead and do that. So I need to answer some questions now that I've colored those in. Okay, and if you'll notice, this is 1/2. It's one colored out of 2 total. 1/4, 1/8, 1/3, and 1/6. Okay, so here we're getting into the comparing. Less than or greater than. So we can use these to help us. So 1/2, that's this one up here, is less than or greater than 1/4. So you're comparing the colored parts. Well, 1/2 is greater than, right? It's a lot more space. In fact, it's double. So I'm going to circle greater than, okay? We're just comparing how much space they take up. Look at letter B. 1/6, so I'm looking at this bottom one, is less than or greater than 1/2. Well, here's my half. Well, if I'm starting with 1/6, that's less than, much smaller than my half. Okay, I'm going to shrink this a little bit to get this all on here. All right, see if I can read this now. 1/3 compared to 1/2. So here's my third. Is that less than or greater than the half? Less than, right? Remember, you're always reading these left to right. And then here we have 1/3 compared to 1/6. So here's a third and a 6. So a third is much bigger than a 6. So we're going to circle greater than. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go to the back. Oh, there's more on the back, right? I'm going to have to go back and forth here. 1/8 and 1/6. Okay, well 1/8 compared to 1/6. 1/8 is smaller, right? So we're going to say is less than 1/8 and 1/4. So 1/8 smaller than 1/4, so 1/8 is less than. For letter F. Letter G, we've got 1/2 compared to 1/8. I know the half is the biggest one, right? So 1/2 has to be bigger than the 1/8. Greater than. And oh, 9/8 and 2/2. Interesting. 9/8. Well, look at that. If this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9/8 would actually be bigger than a whole, wouldn't it? So we'd be talking about this whole thing compared to what? 2/2, which is this whole thing. So which is bigger? The 9/8, right? So we're going to say 9/8 is greater than 2/2. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to enlarge this a little bit more so we can look at number 3. Lily needs 1/3 cup of oil and 1/4 cup of water to make muffins. Will Lily use more oil or more water? Draw the cups of oil and water to explain your answer. So I'm going to draw my cup of oil here and my cup of water here. So this is oil and this is water. Okay. Really, they're just rectangles or squares, whatever shape you end up with. So my oil, I know from the fraction, has to be 3 sections. Okay. And remember, when you're making these cups, you have to make them as close to equal as you can. Mine aren't all that equal. Then this tells us that our cup of water has to be broken into 4 sections. Okay, so she used 1/3 to make the oil, or 1/3 of oil and 1/4 of water. Which is more? Well, you should be able to see that your oil is more. Okay, so I'm going to say Lily uses more oil. Now, if you look back up the top, you can see that in a better way. This is 1/3, so this is the oil, and this is the water. So you can see if I try to line up the edge, this is kind of the extra oil that gets used compared to the water. Okay. All right, a couple more. We're going to put some greater than, less than, or equal signs in. Okay. So 1/3 and 1/5. Well, let's go back up to those strips up here. Do you notice any sort of pattern happening here? This isn't my favorite way to show this. Maybe you've seen it before, but what you should see is that the biggest fractional piece has the smallest denominator. The smallest fractional piece out of these 5 examples has the biggest denominator. So this idea is that as the denominator increases or goes up, the fractional piece, or the fraction size, decreases. So when we're comparing 1/2 and 1/8, as long as we're looking at one section of each, we can look at the denominator and say, well, this is the lower denominator, so it's the bigger piece. It's kind of an opposite relationship. Small number means big piece, right? Because if I have a whole thing and I only break it into 2 pieces, they're going to be big ones. Think about it as a pizza. Do you want to eat half the pizza or 1/8 of the pizza? Well, 1/8 means you cut that same whole pizza into 8 pieces and you only get 1 of them. That's not as much. So let's see if we can use that on this problem number 4. So 1/3 looks like this, right? And 1/5 looks like this. So if I think about that, the lower denominator is the bigger piece. So that means 1/3 is greater than 1/5. Okay, and you can use your fraction strips too to help you with this if you'd like to see that in front of you. 1/7 looks like this. 1/4 looks like this. So this number is bigger than this number. So this is the smaller piece. So my symbol looks like that. Right, 1/6 looks like that. Oh, and 1/6 looks like that. So guess what? Those are both the same piece. They're equal. A couple more here. 1/10 looks like that. 1/12 is that. So this is a lower number, means a bigger piece. So this is going to be bigger. 1/16 compared to 1/11. Of the two numbers, 16 is bigger than 11, so that means it's a smaller piece. So this is our symbol that goes in there. 1/16 is less than 1/11. 1 whole and 2 halves. Well, that's a good one. Skip this for a second. 2 halves means this, right? 2/2. And what do you remember about 1 whole? Well, because this could be anything, right? We don't know how many pieces to break it into. But remember, we learned that when the numerator and the denominator are the same, that equals 1 whole. So these two are actually the same thing. 2 halves is the same as 1 whole. And if you go back up to those fraction strips or look at your own fraction strips, this one is 2 halves. This one is 1, 2, 3, 4 fourths. That's the whole thing. This one's 8 eighths is the whole thing. 3 thirds, 6 sixths. This is just another way of showing 1 whole. It's easier just to write 1 than all those fractions. So that's what people usually do. They just show it like this. Okay? Ooh, bonus problems. Love it. 1/8 and 1/8. Those are equal, right? Now we're comparing 1/8 and 1/6. Well, 1/8 looks like this. this is a bigger denominator, so it's a smaller piece. Okay, now we're comparing 1/6 and 1/3. Well, out of these two, 6 is bigger, so that's smaller. 1/6 is less than 1/3. 1/3 and 2 halves. Oh, we just did 2 halves. That's 2 over 2. We know that's also a whole. So 1/3 is not a whole. That has to be less than 2 halves. And oh, we just figured out 2 halves is equal to a whole. Fun. All right, number 5. Your friend Eric says that 1/6 is greater than 1/5 because 6 is greater than 5. Is Eric correct? Use words and pictures to explain. Okay, so Eric is making a very common 3rd grade mistake, that just because this is a bigger number, it's the bigger piece. But we kind of already talked about that. So let's draw 2 rectangles that are the same size. Do your best to make those really the same, and it helps to draw one under the other because you can see how long to make it each time. Okay. And I'm going to break the first one, I'm going to show 1/6. So I've got to break it into 6 pieces. So I'm going to break it in half and then make each piece 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is 1/6. Now the second one I'm going to break into 5 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got 5 sections. Okay, so to show 1/5, I have to color in one of those. So is he right? No. Eric is wrong because basically when you've got this bigger number, that means you need more pieces and they have to be smaller to fit in the same amount of space, right? So because 1/6 means he needs to fit 6 pieces into the whole. 1/5 means he needs 5 pieces so they will be bigger. Okay? Fewer pieces means that they can be bigger. That's why there's that opposite relationship between the denominator and the size of the piece. Okay? That's it. That is the end of lesson 10. So this is all about comparing greater than, less than. So use your fraction strips if you need to, or the ones on the problem set or your homework, and reason those out by looking at the pieces. Have fun.